So Jeff, a point that you and I bring up a lot when we go on our friend Israel's show on Big Talk Little Talk is that throughout history, protests and riots have worked to install change, right? So do you think that this is the only way that we can get change to occur, so that we can have a more just law enforcement system?
Uh, well, yeah, I mean, some sort of agitation or disruption of the system has always been required to, advance change, and it's indisputable that this is an organic movement. We've had, uh, you know, more than 10 million people. I think the figure I heard was something like 20 million people, out in the streets over the course of the protest movement this summer, which is unprecedented in American history. And it's easy to understand why. I mean, unlike the Assange case, where nobody has really heard very much about what's been done to Julian Assange, or at least not unless they listen to independent media or watch independent media. There's constantly these videos of police violence going viral, that tens of millions of people see. And, how could anyone help but be outraged by what they're seeing? So this is a spontaneous expression of outrage that exceeded the many other things that there are to be outraged because it simply received more attention. Unlike say the healthcare crisis or many other things, even climate change. But as far as our politicians are concerned, what we see is just as there always is, an effort to co-opt these protests, to engage in posturing, kneeling with kente cloth on, and all that shit, and efforts actually to repress the few politicians who are really being forthright about this. So in Seattle, Kashama Sawant has been very vocal and very much a part of the movement against police brutality, and has tried to use the power of her office as a city council person to aid in that movement for change, and create pressure for change on her colleagues in the government. And they are trying to get rid of her. They're filing complaints against her that she's used her office illegally or something to that effect, and they want to boot her out of the city government because she's really the only one that's taking a principled stand for just massive reform of the system of law enforcement in Seattle and around the country. So we'll see what happens, but it's going to take a whole lot more of what we saw this summer and are seeing again now.
Well, no, there is actually.
And
Oh,
I should add, the NBA players almost went on strike. They actually sat out a couple of games. Is probably the biggest weapon we have in our efforts to create change is the ability to withhold our labor. If the NBA players had gone out on strike, and if that had spread to other sectors of the economy, I think that would do more than anything to create pressure for change.
well, there is actually a debate about whether or not the movement is organic. I'm not talking about the people, the individual people who go to the protests. I'm talking about the people who founded the movement, and there's quite a bit of room for skepticism. Alicia Garza, who's one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter organization, she does come out in criticism of establishment Democrats, but ultimately she supports them at the end of the day, just like Bernie Sanders.
Agreed.
She voted, what's that?
Sure. I mean, she's totally
Voted
sold out. No question about it.
Right. That's why I'm saying that the movement, which has obviously been embraced by the establishment, we have to be skeptical of it. The NBA, this international corporation worth, however, I don't even know how many billions of dollars, the idea that this organization is supporting it, we have to be skeptical of that. There's no question that the NBA and the NFL, by the way, are trying to co-opt this in order to pump up voter registration for Joe Biden. Every time you see those ads for I am a voter, When We All Vote was founded by Michelle Obama. I am a voter was founded by prominent neoliberal podcaster Mandaya Dayani. I mean, you can go on and on and on. They're one of the other co-founders of Black Lives Matter is she's been interviewed by Cosmopolitan. She writes for the Huffington Post. I mean, these are CNN, Glamour, Essence. I'm just going down the list here. These are people who are embedded within the establishment. So these protests that you're seeing, these extremely well organized, well funded, well coordinated protests that all sprung up in all of these major cities at exactly the same time. There's clearly some very sophisticated coordination going on here. This is not an organic uprising. This is mass media psyop. I mean, the message, the underlying message is obviously one that we should get on board with, but there's a difference between supporting civil rights and supporting the Black Lives Matter trademark, just like there's a difference between supporting progressivism and supporting the Democratic Party.
Okay, so Jose, do you think that
if I could respond to that, I mean, we have to distinguish between the movement as an organic phenomenon that's a reaction to the injustices that are being perpetrated by the police, and people like Alicia Garza. Just as we make a distinction between the authentic, genuine movement against to make changes to slow down climate change, versus people like Josh Fox, et cetera, who are doing their best to co-opt the environmental movement with quite some success. As Max Blumenthal pointed out in a great article he did a couple of weeks ago in Gray Zone. I mean, wherever you look, at whatever movement, yes, there are going to be people trying to co-opt it, trying to be opportunistic in their approach to it, of course. But that doesn't mean that the real movement doesn't exist.
Well, but these are the founders. These aren't just people who are co-opting it. Like the NBA and the NFL are obviously trying to, get their hands in the pot. But I'm talking about the three co-founders. There's reasons for skepticism for all three of them. The least with Patrisse Cullors, because she seems to be the most educated of the three. But the other two definitely are embedded within the corporate establishment. I mean, I don't trust people who have that kind of power.
Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I couldn't hear you.
Go ahead, Jose.
I'm not, and I'm in Black Lives Matter. So are lots of other people all over the country.
I would agree
not
with
just these three people.
Well, but I'm talking about the founders. I specifically said that I'm not talking about every single person who goes to the protests. I'm talking about the founders.
To that point, I mean, I think I agree with Jeff's framing of it. To your point of founders, I mean, like, I do think that they probably did spread that. But who are the founders of like the Pride movement? It was people keep throwing themselves into that, and then somebody made themselves, and then it became a corporate logo that Nike and Starbucks use like once a year to drive up sales, but not really give a shit about the issue, right? And I do agree that BLM is basically becoming that in a lot of fashions. But the NFL is becoming that because for nearly a decade they were the number one wall against it. And trying to fire Kaepernick and make kneeling a whole big deal. And now they're like, well, yeah, we were wrong, and please keep watching our stuff. NBA players now, NBA is embracing it because they're like, please don't go on strike. It's becoming a corporate logo to drive up sales. I don't disagree with that cynicism, but I don't think there's any founders of this movement. The founders of Black Lives Matter are like Trayvon Martin. That's really when like the movement for police accountability eventually grew into something that had a logo, that had a hashtag, that had organization, that had nonstop responses until it grew to this point. I do think that it's been cynically used this election year to stop the conversation of class, of saying Bernie girls are too white. It's been weaponized in the way that Alyssa Milano has weaponized the Me Too movement to completely, throw women under the bus that want to come forward. But to Jeff's point, that happens in every movement. You have opportunists that become the gatekeepers, and then obviously, they're going to go help corporate media or the Democrats. But the movement itself has to steamroll past that, which I'm hoping Me Too keeps doing to Alyssa Milano and people that want to be gatekeepers for that.
So I see what Jeff and Jose are saying here, that the movement existed before the organizations existed.
Well, no, it didn't.
Advantage of it.
Well, no, it didn't. There was a civil rights movement that existed before Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives Matter with the capital B, the capital L, and the capital M, that is a piece of intellectual property in the same way that there's a difference between Me Too and the campaign for gender equality, anti-sexual harassment in the workplace, etc. So no, Trayvon Martin did not found Black Lives Matter. It was founded by the aforementioned 3 individuals. Now with Me Too, it was founded by a woman named Tarana Burke. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her name, but she has been vocally critical of what Alyssa Milano has done to hijack the movement. So what I'm saying is, there's a difference between the movement for civil rights and this commodity that is known as Black Lives Matter. It's a distinction that I think people are uncomfortable acknowledging because they don't want to admit how pervasive this system of control, this psyop, really is. But just like I think it's a lot easier for people to see that the Me Too movement, as hijacked by Alyssa Milano, is a crock because they probably don't have as much invested in it. But what we see with these riots that are going on, people want to think that this is the moment of revolution, but when we see how embedded the various power players involved are to the establishment, we can see that these people have no incentive to actually bring about change. I mean, the NBA and the NFL, for example, those institutions profit from the bankrupting of low-income communities. NBA and NFL stadiums are paid for through taxpayer subsidies, particularly in the poorest areas, which obviously affect people of color. There's a total hypocrisy in LeBron James wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt at the same time that the arenas that he plays in, as I said, they're blood-sucking entities that profit off of impoverished communities. There's a total hypocrisy there. He's also close to Barack Obama. I mean, these are not our role models. These are not the revolutionaries. These are not the people who are going to lead us out of the darkness.
Yeah. I agree that it has to come up in the grassroots, like us, the people,
yes,
are the ones that started. But like with the hashtag like BLM and all that, who started that though? Was it the people who are leading the organization right now, or was that the people who started saying Black Lives Matter?
Well, who started it versus what it has become, that can be 2 separate things. I mean, the 3 people I mentioned earlier are the people. They're the people who created the Black Lives Matter network or organization. I can look it up if you'd like.
It wasn't just created by 3 people.
I see it was.
I feel like PSYOP would be the 3 people,
Yeah.
What's that?
If it's a PSYOP, wouldn't it be those 3 people trying to trademark a movement?
Well, that's basically what they've done.
Right.
That's what I said.
Right, but there was a movement to trademark before they did that.
It says here, I'm reading, this is one source I have here, that in 2013, I don't know how to pronounce their 3 names, so I'm not even going to try, formed the Black Lives Matter network. Again, this is separate from the civil rights movement. Like Martin Luther King Jr. obviously did not create the civil rights movement. He didn't create this organization that's like a piece of intellectual property with a trademark at the end of it. Like, he was a public figure. We don't need to get into his connections to the establishment. But what I'm saying is these 3 individuals who are being interviewed by all of these mainstream media conglomerates, I mean, if you don't see that there's reason for skepticism here, then I don't know what more I can do for you.
I think that you should be skeptical of anything that rich people say, but I do think there was a movement to commodify and profit from before it became that.
Yeah, but that wouldn't mean that the current Black Lives Matter network is not also an attempt at commodification. Obviously, there are other people trying to profit off of it.
Yeah,
I don't see the
Black Lives
point.
Matter hashtag appeared in 2013.
Yeah, at the same time that these three women founded the Black Lives Matter network.
No.
But what came first, though?
I mean, I don't know that it's relevant. I mean, if these three people are creating the network, the fact is that everybody and their mother knows what Black Lives Matter is today, that everybody's heard about it, that's because they have heard of the network that was founded by these three women. You see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's almost like saying that there's like however many people who founded Antifa or something, which, I mean, that's ridiculous. It's a very decentralized movement.
No, Antifa is completely different.
These three people in particular co-opting it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist as an entity on its own that many other people are active in, and that it's a real thing and not just a marketing gimmick or whatever.
The only reason, though, that people participate
in Matter meeting.
The only reason that people participate in it is because of the popular enthusiasm and support for it. They need to have the approval of this wide swath of people before they're going to have the courage to join in with the riots and the protests and everything else. I marched in the Black Lives Matter protest in Boston back in June. I can't remember the date, but I was there in June. There were thousands and thousands of people there. It was so incredibly well organized, and as I mentioned earlier, it was synchronized in time with protests out in Portland, Oregon, Los Angeles, and several other major cities besides. I mean, this required a very extensive amount of expertise, professional organization. This was not grassroots, is what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting, obviously, that every single person who went out there and protested is consciously and complicitly part of a psyop, because obviously then I would be including myself. But the fact is that Black Lives Matter TM has become this commodity that has been sold to the American public. This is not a revolution. This is just something that is now being used to support the Democratic Party. And I've talked about this on the Hear Me Out show on YouTube, that every time you go to one of these rallies now, you're going to see people who work for the Joe Biden campaign. And what is their conclusive message every time? Vote. That doesn't mean go vote for anybody. It means go vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah, I'll say, like, when I went to the BLM protests in DC, it didn't look like it was organized by any organization. It looked like the people organized it. I mean, there was like local bands playing, like local go-go bands that were playing. It was the people like that were dressed in like they like these were poor people that went out and bought like food for everybody and were handing it out. Unless they were like hiding in the shadows, like these organization leaders.
Well, as I said, not every single person who attends the protest is part of it. They are the people who organize it are obviously the smallest part. The executives are the smallest part of any organization, be it a PSYOP or something more obvious.
So I used to organize with a group in Chicago called the Pilsen Alliance, and we would, sometimes do street protests, I would say, a lot of work does go into turning out a city for a protest, but smaller organizations that have already been driving people out for those causes are usually the driving force, and they get a whiff of where the money is coming from. But it only really goes as far as amplification goes, as far as the help goes. I do think that, Black Lives Matter has been, become a marketing scheme. And as far as PSYOPs go, I don't think that we can know what drives people to do what any more than the people that make commercials know. They're probably the experts, the ones that are getting us to keep buying stupid stuff amidst this pandemic, probably know, what drives people out in mass a little bit more than some bougie elite trying to, drive up sales or get a voter base out. I do think the response of Black Lives Matters came from cases like Trayvon Martin, because that's what I hear here in Chicago. And also because this was Obama City and he was the president and he was helping his guy become mayor and make his police even less accountable to the public. So the overt hypocrisy was really felt here in Chicago. That it blew up into something that is now a stamp that can then try to say, hey, those riots are nothing to do with us. That's the wrong way to protest. Please be civil. Please dial back. We're about a peaceful, controlled, women's march, sunrise movement type of march type of protest. That's not the Black Lives Matter orgs that I've known here in Chicago.
I'm looking here at blacklivesmatter.com. I'm at the shop section where you can buy your hat for $30, your Freedom hoodie for $45, your FUBU Black Lives Matter hoodie for $60. Down at the bottom, they got the cover of Time magazine where the 3 founders of the Black Lives Matter network appeared on the cover, no less, on the list of the 100 most influential people. Down here, you can call their official number. It's open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. I mean, this is... As I've said repeatedly, I don't think that this part of my message is getting across. There are certainly people who have an authentic interest or commitment to this. There are perhaps individual branches that are authentic, and it may have arisen from authentic outrage. Somebody, in this case, these 3 women, saw the opportunity to capitalize on this massive outrage and decided to make it into a commodity in the same way that Joe Biden is trying to capitalize on the outrage in order to convince people to vote for him and put him into power. So yeah, I have no reason to trust that these founders of the movement are authentic. I mean, I don't know. What's that?
You keep harping on this point that we've already said we agree with, but you're failing to recognize our point.
I did just say that I recognize that not every single person, obviously, who participates in it is a conscious, like, I'm not saying that every single person who's part of it is, like, they're trying to create a psyop.
Are not.
What's that?
Most of them are not. We're talking about millions of people here. Most of them
that's what
are
I said.
not part of the co-optation.
Right, that's what I said. I said that in any organization, the people at the top are obviously going to be largely outnumbered by everybody beneath them. That's true of Walmart. That's true of any organization. Yeah, obviously, you are authentic in your support for it. That's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is these efforts, what the people who are organizing this want you to do at the end of the day is vote for Joe Biden. That doesn't mean they're going to succeed.
Some of them.
What's that?
Some of them.
The people who are organizing it, yes. The people at the top.
No, there's more people organizing it than, Alicia Garza and so on and so forth.
Yes, I've said that. I said that there are authentic offshoots and branches of it.
Okay, but Jose's point is that for these things to happen, there has to be a massive number of people involved in organizing them. They don't just happen because people, executives or whatever, snap their fingers.
I didn't say that. Well, the Democratic Party, there's going to be about 65 million people who are going to go vote for it this November. I don't disagree.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't disagree with your skepticism of the website or the 3 people that run it. But I don't know what more they do other than try to get like the NBA to use the brand or get more celebrities to use the brand, and then of course funnel that into the Democratic Party that will fund their movement. Why the Republican Party is not at the table, I don't know. We should ask them. But I do think that overall, like, riots in the streets are not a psyop. That's people that are extremely frustrated and upset. Portland, I think, is an example of it getting away from organizers and playing more into the police hands. But I think Seattle has become an example of real commitment to the cause. I mean, we just saw Kaswana Sawant was able to rally the city council to override the mayor's budget that was going to give the police a pass. It's a very tiny micro fight, but that's why people are agitated in those cities. They've been democratically controlled for so long, and those budgets are nearly always more than 50% go to police. The power to change the conversation for Black Lives Matters and law enforcement begins in those cities, and it's been the Democratic Party that's been most transigent about listening to protesters and organizers, and instead giving police their way. I think that's why people are burning things down.
The burning and the looting is from a legitimate place of anger, but it's being encouraged and fostered by the establishment in order to achieve whatever their own. No, it is. It is. What I'm saying is that with these, what's that?
No, it's just not. Just plain not.
No, it definitely is. What's happening is we're seeing this now occur on a mass scale. Why is it occurring on a mass scale? It's occurring because the establishment media is promoting it and condoning it. It's because there's the idea of strength in numbers. It's inspiring people and giving them the courage to go out and do it. It's because it has become popularized, or as I used the term earlier, commodified. It's because this has become an object of mass appeal. And this goes with any kind of organization. There's this effort to mobilize people, whether it's 65 million people voting for the Democrats, whether it's 100 million people who go out to see the new Star Wars movie, or in this case with BLM. If the NBA is agreeing to do a deal with BLM, then there's something in it for the NBA.
But what does that have to do with riots? I mean, that's completely antithetical to organizing people to go vote for Joe Biden.
I think you're misunderstanding me. I'm not condemning the riots. I'm not taking the conservative stance here.
I'm not saying I'm condemning the riots. I'm saying that doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me to think that the same people are pushing people to go vote for Joe Biden.
Oh, no, it makes sense. It makes sense.
To disrupt society. That makes no sense.
No, here's how it makes sense. The reason it makes sense is because it depicts an American civilization that has become increasingly unstable as a result of Donald Trump's reign. You see how Donald Trump is trying to use the footage of the riots and say, this is Joe Biden's America. I'm just getting a drink of water. He's using it and he's saying, this is Joe Biden's America. Don't vote for Joe Biden or you're going to have more of this. Conversely, the Democrats are trying to use this widespread portrait of instability and unrest in order to say to people, look at what Donald Trump's dumbass has done. The entire country is falling apart because this racist charlatan has let the entire country fall to pieces. This is ridiculous. This isn't who we are. It's the same way, it's for the same reason that the Democrats try to put up they try to emphasize the children in cages on the border, even though they were doing it themselves. They're trying to send a message that we cannot trust Donald Trump to govern this country because he brings out the worst in us. That's why they're trying to talk about build back better. We can be better people. This is not who we are. We can do better than this. The rioting would, in theory, support the Democrats. It's not going to guarantee a Biden victory, but you can see how Donald Trump is exploiting it to political ends. Why couldn't the Democrats do it for their own ends?
I think
of course they're exploiting it for their own ends. That's completely different from encouraging or promoting it.
Yeah, I think that instead of encouraging and promoting it, I think the encouragement is actually from police. Our police union in Chicago has endorsed Donald Trump. That's what they're running on. They want law and order, and I don't think that's any different from any of the police unions that are in play here. And Donald Trump is virtue to them and the rich suburbs that surround these cities that tend to vote right wing, that sometimes vote Democrat because they're close to big cities, but that I want their big cities back to be in law and order. It's really just both of them playing to their bases, but overtly the people in play of escalating or de-escalating, or to what degree these riots are going to take place, are in the hands of the police unions of those cities that overwhelmingly support Donald Trump, but want support from their local municipality at the same time. The police always play a very complicated political game, and at the end of the day, they really just want their nice paychecks and peace and quiet outside. And they want a president that'll give them carte blanche to do anything they want to protesters, and that would even normalize other people killing people for them if it makes their job easier. So that's all I see. I just see American politics playing out in the three cities, not a psyop from any one direction.
But isn't that exactly what I just said? That it's being exploited for political ends. I mean, you are agreeing with me.
I don't disagree.
You're agreeing with me in the substance of what I'm saying. You're just disagreeing in some of the particulars. I mean, it sounds like you guys are actually on board with me.
I don't
the substance. It's just you're not putting all the puzzle pieces together. I mean, I could be wrong in my final conclusion, but it sounds like we agree on points A through Y.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more like, what conclusions and what framing to proceed forward. I guess that's my concern, but ultimately the dynamics in play that you're pointing out, I mean, I don't disagree that they're in play.
I already drank all this water.
Yeah, go for it.
No, keep going. I'm listening.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree that those dynamics are in play. I think ultimately the authenticity that we're pining for, what is not, something that the establishment is doing for their own ends, is still out there in these movements and the people protesting, and that's why there's still uncertainty. That's the only thing that keeps things uncertain going into November, in my opinion. Because for me, I see Mitch McConnell and Trump already being like, we can steal this thing. Yeah, why don't we steal this thing? I don't know. Well, let's do it then. All right. I think that whatever America's reaction is going on to these ongoing protests leading up to November is the only thing that keeps things in flux, and I do think that's organic.
I will say that when I was on the ground in DC, a lot of the people there had like when I asked them, like they knew about the organization and say, yeah, we don't agree with this being like corporatized. We don't agree with like the BLM like corporation organization, but we agree with the principle of BLM. And
it is being
one guy.
corporatized.
I don't know if he was working for the campaign, but there was this guy like he was very excited and he was handing out like Joe Biden stickers and buttons and like shirts and everything, but for the most part people were ignoring him and like walking away from him. I don't think he got to sell many Biden's merchandise. So do you guys think that this is gonna, like, this is my last question for you guys here because we are at the 2-hour mark, but do you guys think that the BLM protests will die down under a Biden presidency than under a Trump presidency?
The media coverage of civil rights issues will be diminished under a Biden presidency because we tend to forget that those protests, riots, whatever term you prefer, down in Ferguson, and of course the aforementioned outrage over the killing of Trayvon Martin, that occurred on Obama's watch. And it got pretty intense down there in Ferguson, but the media certainly did not indulge in that coverage to the same extent that it has the George Floyd protests and the various other protests of this summer. And I think that when Biden gets into office, the Democrats' allies in the establishment media will continue to do everything in their power to cover for him. If there's a way to exploit the next tragedy in order to make Biden look good, then they will do it. But if it's in his best interest for the public not to know about it, then they'll try to minimize it. The last thing I just want to say before I turn it over to the others is that there was that one shooting, I think it was in 2014 or 2015, of the black man in North Carolina. He was running away from the police officer. The police officer shot him, walked over and dropped his gun next to the victim, and then lied and said that the victim tried to pull the gun off of him. That case never became a source of national outrage because there was no controversy to sell. There was no ambiguity. There was no question. There was no distinction. It was just plain as day that the cop killed the guy and lied about it. In all of these other cases, they try to promote the controversy so that people will argue with each other. And that is the principle that's going to be adhered to if Joe Biden does, in fact, pull this one off.
Others?
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, do you think that these protests will die down under a Biden presidency because they'll have a sense of accomplishment? Or do you think that most people understand that Biden is not in it to help them out, and so the protests will proceed with the momentum that they have right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to see Biden as a victory. The protests themselves will probably be, I mean, I don't think the media framing is going to go away immediately, because a lot of work is going to have to go into framing good protesters versus bad protesters. A protest with too many white people that are breaking things are bad protesting. A protest with people of color marching peacefully for optics and cameras is good protesting. A lot of money and work is going to have to go into that for Biden presidency to have the flex it's going to need. It's my opinion.
All right, Jeff?
Well, I mean, there's always an effort by the corporate media and others in the establishment to brainwash people, to co-opt movements and so forth. That happens regardless of who's president. These protests are not simply about violence by the police. There are strong undercurrents of other issues which are often talked about, even though the spark that initiated these protests was police violence. There's a lot else going on, and those issues are not going to go away. Obviously, if Biden becomes president, they're only going to get worse. The inequality, the violence, the lack of health care, the environmental crisis. All of these things are going to keep happening, and police violence is going to keep happening. And we have to remember this movement against police violence became a prominent thing during the Obama administration. There was a lot of protest in general during the Obama administration, Standing Rock and Ferguson and Occupy Wall Street and so on and so forth. Certainly there's a segment of society, upper middle class or whatever, that did kind of go to sleep when Biden was president and went to brunch or whatever. And when Obama was president. Those people are always there, and so that's part of what's going to happen too. Certainly some people will go to sleep if Biden is president. Others will not be, because of the circumstances in their lives that are motivating them to push for change.
And it's up to people like us as informers to wake those people up if we do have a Biden presidency, and if we do see a sleepiness behavior happening under his presidency. But I think that regardless if it's Trump or Biden, we will see a rise in collective consciousness. There can be an argument whether we would see it accelerated under a Trump presidency versus a Biden presidency. But I don't know, that's a discussion for another day. But other than that, I thank you guys so much for being on this recording. It's a shame that the live stream didn't work out because I don't know what happened. YouTube kicked us out, or there was some connection problems. But other than that, I will bring this recording to an end. Thank you, Dak, Jeff, and Jose for being on the show.
Thank you, Franco, and thank you, Dak and Jose.
Thanks, guys.